Good evening, everybody. We're live again with our connecting series of interviews with really interesting people, and I've got another one today, an interesting person. We've got Lindsay Banks, psychic medium, and today we're going to talk about channeling, but specifically the Pleiadians. It's easy to say than it is to spell, as I realised earlier. So first of all, I want to ask Lindsay to tell us a bit about herself, first of all, and how she got involved in this kind of business, and what sort of fingers she's got in what sort of pies and things. And then we'll talk a bit about the channeling and more specifically the Pleiadians. So I'll hand it over to you, Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for having me here. I really do appreciate it. So I never really set out with the intention of doing what I'm currently doing. I was always interested in ghosts, like as a little girl. And I remember reading a book called Voices in My Ear by Doris Stokes when I was about 12 or 13. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, how awesome that this person can speak to people who aren't here anymore. And that sort of like fueled a fascination around that age, of knowing that there was something after this sort of life. And then it sort of went on the back burner, as I was like a teenager, and then went to uni, when got a proper job working for Tesco. And yeah, everything, like I didn't really do sort of spiritual work then. And it wasn't until, when was it? It must have been 2008. I was working for Tesco. I was working long hours. I was a manager there, and I was really stressed. And I was like, I need something, but I was like, I don't want a massage, but I just need something to help me learn to relax, because I just felt really stressed out. So I went and learned Reiki, which sort of opened this door back up again for me into crystals, which I'd never sort of like known or heard of before. So I started using crystals, and then I went to see a medium, and then I just started going to this monthly psychic fair down in Peterborough where I lived at the time, and then just meeting all these amazing people, and just started reading books and really sort of getting more into it again, and combining it at the time with work. So I'd be walking around Tesco, in my pocket jangle and full of crystals. And then it wasn't really until like 2016, and one of my best friends passed away from cancer on my 36th birthday, and a death really hit me. So even though I knew our spirit had passed, to the other side, physically and emotionally, I was like, I just didn't feel like I was in a good place. So I started utilizing all these tools I'd learned, meditation, Reiki, speaking to angels, speaking to spirit guides, and stuff just started coming back to me that I'd sort of learned. And I was having to put all this theory into practice in the real world, and going, right, how can I speak to angels and raise my children and be a single mom and do all this stuff? But it just started coming back, and I started meeting some really awesome people who started helping me on my path. And then a friend of mine had been told that he could do mediumistic work. So I said, oh, well, I'll come with you to the spiritualist church, as support. And I ended up doing it. And I was like, how? I didn't even think that I could do that. But I just started like seeing exactly what I was seeing. And people were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. And I was like, really? And the first sort of like experience I would say that I had of channeling someone was Shakespeare at the church. Right. And it was like I was doing this automatic writing, where you write without really thinking. Mm-hmm. And it was like, thou art this, thou art that. And I'm like, who speaks like that? And at the end, I was just sort of told, or I could see Shakespeare. And he made me laugh because he said, all these pictures, Lindsay, they make me out to be so serious, but I had a really good sense of humor. I was like, all right. Mm-hmm. So that's probably where the channeling sort of started coming in, really.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you mentioned about the Reiki, and we had a chap on last week, the Reiki master, and that seems to be a lot of where people sort of are drawn in through the healing or the Reiki or some of these things, and because it kind of opens up channels, I suppose, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, I think if you're not already sort of like into this, you know, if your parents maybe weren't, or, you know, if you've been sort of like conditioned to this world, you know, then yeah, the healing is definitely like an avenue into opening up to spirit, because we all have these abilities within us. It's not, you know, a select few who've been chosen to do this. It's like we can all speak to spirit if we want to. I think it's having that confidence, that spirit, that to be able to say, first of all, what you're feeling, what you're seeing, etc. And it's also learning some more things about like setting boundaries with spirit. So people say to me, you know, they're like, God, your house must be full all the time. And I'm like, the only time now like spirits come through to me is either when I'm doing yoga or when I'm in the shower, because that's when I'm quiet. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like working, or I'm not with my kids. And I'll say to them, like, I'll just say, look, you know, I'll sit down and I'll speak with you once I'm dressed and I'm sorted, or once I've finished my yoga. So, yeah.
No, that's really interesting, because, like you said, the connection that you have when you're doing healing, I would imagine it's a similar connection that you're using, because you're tuning into a vibration or a frequency, I suppose, in relation to your channeling. So, in relation to the actual, when you do a channeling session, is it sort of an inspiration thing that comes to you, or is it just a case of sitting down, meditating, asking that you ask for something? How does it work, or does it kind of depend on, you know, where you are or what you're doing, really?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. The way that it works for me generally is because I have two small children, so the days with them are very long, very intense, and often it's more that I'll just fall asleep, you know, at the end of the night, and then I don't wake up until they're awake. So in terms of, you know, sitting down every day to meditate, I don't do that, because I just can't with two small children, and I'm homeschooling as well, so it's not possible. But what happens with me is I get what feels like someone touching my head, like if you imagine someone stroking your head, and it gets stronger and stronger, and it's like I know that generally when it's that the Pleiadians or some multidimensional beings want to speak on it. But
so basically, you know, is it kind of them contact? Is it them ringing you then? You don't ring them, ringing you rather than you ringing them, would you say? Generally?
Yeah.
Okay.
And with the spirits of the people who've come through to me this year, they've always just appeared in my mind's eye. Like I said, when I'm doing yoga or when I'm in the shower, they never come through when I'm actually meditating. Do you know what I mean?
Right. That's interesting.
It's either when I'm just journaling, writing, painting, or doing my yoga. That's when they tend to come through.
I suppose I suppose it'll be when you've got a quiet time, though, won't it? When your mind's quiet, and that's, you know, it's like anything. If you've got an intuition, it's when you sat, you know, either meditating or quiet time, whatever, you know, that kind of thing, isn't it, really? So, I mean, I think the channeling things are, interesting, really. But we're going to talk today specifically about the Pleiadians, which I've got a little bit of knowledge, but obviously, you know, not to the degree that you've got. I was involved some years ago with the UFO groups and various things, and I spoke to many experts in the field, and they were talking about possibly at least 20 different races of aliens. And this was back in a couple of decades ago. So, for yourself, when you is it mostly are you connected mostly to the Pleiadians, or have you got other energies that you connect to, would you say?
Yeah, so it's other energies. I mean, I suppose I was saying to you, the other day that I've inadvertently been channeling the Pleiadians for a number of years without actually knowing, just through the words and things that I've said. When I was 18, we were discussing about how the world began, and the teacher was like, is it Darwinism? Is it Big Bang? And I'm sort of like putting my hand up going, it's actually we're part of a big experiment for the aliens. And everyone was just like, what's she on about? Do you know what I mean? And just started laughing. And I was like, all right, okay. And then a few years ago, I kept saying to people, we need to eradicate the word should from the dictionary, because otherwise, whenever we use it, it's indicating blame or guilt, So it wasn't until I'd read that book by Barbara Marciniak, The Bringers of the Dawn, that I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been channeling. And, some of the writings that I did for my book back in 2018 was the Pleiadians as well, but I just didn't realize, because
Right.
sometimes when I was doing the writing, I just presumed that it was my spirit guides helping me to write.
Right. Got you.
You know, so because I never asked who was working with me, I would just sit and write. And then it wasn't until I was with my children just doodling one day, and I just wrote the name down, Al Khael. I was like, who's Al Khael? And then I just got, he's a Pleiadian. And I said to you, didn't I? I said, I'll show you this picture. And I'm not an artist by any means, but I don't know if you can see that. So that was
you're not an artist, but it's quite, you can see what it's, the face, can't you, there, definitely.
Yeah, so that was sort of the first picture that I drew of the Pleiadians, and this must have been about 18 months ago. And I said, the Pleiadians are peaceful and a race made of love and light. We are bringing in this energy to you all at this time. Some may feel it more than others. Some may channel our messages. Some may feel it in their hearts and take action based on it. We are truly grateful that you are listening.
That's really interesting. So you mentioned about the fact that the Pleiadians, or whoever you mentioned, was talking about as being an alien experiment. So do you think I presume you've heard of like Zachariah Sitchin? Would you say that he talked about similar thing, and basically I think his were linked to sort of the Anunnaki and people like that, but the message was very similar in that we were seeded here, or some kind of experiment or whatever, which when you look back at the history, and when you look at how we just sort of kind of came into being, it makes more sense than evolution, for example, which really doesn't make sense, does it? So you think what do you know about in that respect about the actual how we came to be? Because I'll just throw this out as well. For example, Edgar Cayce, in America, the psychic in America, he talked about, I think it was 5 root races as well. So different root races, and when in the beginning, I suppose, and I'm a bit of an Edgar Cayce fan myself. So how would when you look back at the the beginning, if you like, in this planet, how would you see that? How did you see that sort of happening, or how did the Pleiadians sort of come across to you and that?
So they shared with me in one channeling about a place called Lemuria, which I had no knowledge of before they started telling me this. And basically they said to me that at that time that I had been this high priestess, and that I'd been killed in that time. And they said that at that time, like, men and women respected each other's differences, and we all worked together, and it was very much based on community and values. There was no sort of like inequality based on gender or race or anything else. And basically they told me that it was the Pleiadians who had sort of like planted us here, if you like, and we were this experiment. But what had happened is that one of the other races from the galaxy had infiltrated Lemuria and started spreading words of jealousy, creating anger and envy amongst the men, who then killed the women. So this is what I was told, and I was trying to find some sort of validation, because I was like, well, in every other text I've read, or that I did find that I read, it said that Lemuria had been washed away and there'd been this big flood. But I was like, I was definitely told I was killed. And there was one other channeler that I found online whose story was the same as mine, and they'd written it or spoken it back in 2002. So I emailed them, because I was like, you're the only other person that I found whose story is similar to mine. Would you be able to talk about it? But unfortunately, they never replied. So that's basically what they'd said to me. So like Lemuria was the first chance. That didn't work. And then my feeling is, and I don't know that much about Atlantis, but my feeling is Atlantis was the second chance. That didn't work out. So they were like, right, we're going to have to give them longer and just leave them to it. That's my feeling. So then again, we'll start again with the more ancient civilizations like Egypt, with the pyramids and everything. So something my son said today actually really made sense, because you know, in a lot of the drawings with the Egyptians, they've got these really like big hats, haven't they, coming
That's
out?
right. The big back at the back of the heads are very long, aren't they?
Yeah,
Elongated.
and I was like, and it was only my son today pointed it out, and he was like, you know, it's funny, isn't it? Because that's sort of like what aliens' heads look like. And I was like, yes, that is. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, maybe that's why they're portrayed wearing the hats, because
that's a really good point. And if you look, there's a tribe in Africa who actually, I think still to this day, they try and modify the heads when the kids are growing up to make them longer at the back, because they say that's how the gods looked. So these kind of things are said, and there is some skulls as well. I don't know if it's South America. They've found now that they've got the elongated skulls. There's a few of them knocking around as well. So there's lots of interesting. But that's interesting. You mentioned Lemuria, because I was going to ask about, you know, you've got your Lemuria and Mu and Atlantis. And I was just wondering, you know, what the connections were to those places. And you've obviously mentioned Lemuria. There could be, like you say, consecutive things anyway, couldn't there? I mean, Atlantis could have come from Lemuria and various things, or it could have been different interventions, as you say, couldn't it?
Yeah. So, like I said, I haven't been given that like much on Atlantis, so I don't know that much about it. But it feels like at that time, and you know, like people are like, oh well, there was possibly this ancient civilization. I'm like, well, if it wasn't then, no one would have written about it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it feels like that was the first attempt. But like I said, they had this other race came in and sort of disturbed their experiment, if you like.
It's interesting as well, because if you think about the word Atlantis, it's almost like Atlantic. So you know, and you know, there's a lot of things under the sea around that area, which I find quite interesting. Another thing that I think is interesting, and I don't know if you'd agree with this or the Pleiadians have mentioned anything, but looking back again in Africa, the Zulu people, their tradition, they keep handing it down, but they talked about the original humans were androgynous, and then the aliens came down and made us not that created conflict. So that's kind of what you talked about there a little bit, isn't it? So I think that's quite interesting as well, because you can sort of see how that would create obviously quite a lot of division, I suppose, couldn't you?
Yeah. So I channeled a chap in a couple of weeks ago. Again, I'll show you my art, and it was interesting because I put down that I keep wanting to call him a he, but that's just out of thing. So if you can see there, and I wrote down the name Ashtar on the front, and then next to it I wrote androgynous beings.
Right, that's really interesting.
So we are the only species in the galaxy, that aren't androgynous. Every other being that I've had contact with, they are androgynous. The Pleiadians are androgynous, so they may appear to us, as either being either female form or male form, but they are all androgynous. And I did a YouTube video, I don't know if you saw the other day, about do aliens have sex? Because I was asking them, I was like, well, how do you procreate? How do you get more alien babies? And they were telling me that it was done like more in a laboratory, and that the different beings would choose whether they wanted to take on the role of a mother or father. But it wasn't just down to them to look after the child. It was everyone within their sort of community would look after them. Do you know what I mean? So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is really. I haven't heard that specifically before about the alien races all being androgynous, but it does make sense. I mean, I used to know a very high spiritual person, I suppose you'd say, and don't think this was well known, but that person was born androgynous, and it's very it's quite uncommon. It's not very common, but it does happen now and again. And this particular person is a very, very high psychic, medium, spiritual person. So I find that quite interesting. Because if you think about the what all these traditions have said, then this is, you know, most of the conflict is based around differences in people, isn't it, really? So,
Yeah.
you know, if you want to control people, you need to divide and conquer, don't you? And that's a really good way, I suppose. So that's interesting. So looking at the specifically at the Pleiadians, I always sort of see them, or people always see them as your Nordic sort of aliens, you know, with the blonde hair and you know Pamela Anderson type thing. You know, is that fair to say? You know, is that how they come through to you?
The way they
Or is that
present,
just a sort of sci-fi thing?
yeah, the way that they've presented themselves to me is very sort of, they're blue. They don't actually have mouths. So I think in that drawing, yeah, I didn't draw mouth. It's literally their eyes and their nose. So I did do a meditation where I was taken up into a spaceship. And it was by a guy called Steve Noble, who does these really good transmissions on YouTube. So I'd gone into this spaceship, and as soon as I got in there, I could see they were just really tall blue beings. So they were taller than us, about 7 foot. And they had their eyes and their nose. And I looked at them, and in my mind, I was like, how do you communicate if you don't have mouths? And I got back in my mind, we communicate via telepathy. And literally, like, less than 5 seconds later, this Steve Noble said, so when you're on the spaceship, these beings will communicate with you via telepathy. And I was like, well, I already know that, you know, because they've done it. So yeah, so they don't have so much. Yeah, I wouldn't compare them to Pamela Anderson quite, but it's more just like, it is long, sort of silvery hair that they have.
Yeah, I can understand why people would use that comparison, really, because it's you know, the quite blonde platinum sort of hair, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, in relation to, I don't know if you know, we mentioned this before previously, but in relation to the Pleiadians, I don't know if you call it, is there a collective or a federation that they work with other races? Would you say?
Yeah, they do. So, the Pleiadians are the ones who are working closest at the minute with human beings, because they're the closest in terms of sort of like our vibration. So there's more of us that are aware of the Pleiadians at present. But they do work with, as far as I'm aware, the other main races that I know of, the Arcturians, the Syrians, and the I don't know how you say that, Lyrians.
Lyrians, something like that. Yeah. Like that.
So they do work with other beings amongst the galaxy. And apparently the place that I originate from, if you like, I had an Akashic record done years ago. And I was told I was part of what was called the Nihal Collective. So it's spelled Nihal. And apparently what had happened is our planet had been destroyed, and we'd gone to work with the Pleiadians before then coming here. But yeah, they also have the Galactic Council, or whatever you want to call it, which is made up of 12 different beings from different places. So,
that's interesting. So presumably they have some kind of rules in relation to interacting with different races or others, I suppose. Is that would that be fair to say?
Yeah. So I mean, they're not meant to come and, you know, obviously take us. So you know how some people have said that they've been abducted and they've been experimented on. So some people have described those as like the greys, and they're the ones that aren't particularly pleasant, if you like. So we do have free will on this planet, and they won't intervene, you know, unless we ask for help. So if we, you know, when people say, oh, if you pray or if you ask the angels and then something happens, and people call it divine intervention, it's like, well, all you have to do is ask. And, you know, I've had a few people recently where I've been told, and they're like, well, you know, I wish they were doing something about what's happening now. And I'm like, well, they're there, you know, they're watching us and they're seeing everything just playing out. But the messages I keep getting is everything's playing out as it's meant to, you know, you're doing really well. Like everyone's like doing their meditation, like, well, people are doing their meditations, and the vibration has lifted, if you like, of the collective consciousness. So we are doing the right things, and they are there, you know, working with us and alongside us. So
that's interesting. So would you say then that the greys and the people, from my experience with being a UFO researcher back in the day, it would seem to me as the greys are not a how would you put it, sort of an AI sort of, you know, not possibly an actual real alien, maybe more of an AI, who work for maybe someone else, maybe some reptilians, I don't know. So would you say that they don't abide or by the other races? Are they kind of outside of that, would you say then? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I feel so. Yeah, I feel as if they it's like they abide by their own laws, and then I would sit. And again, I don't know this for certain, but I just feel as if they then have to contend with the Galactic Council, because it's not just like the laws that we have here on Earth. There is laws in the galaxy and universal laws, which are meant to be abided by. So yeah,
that's in I think that would make sense, because there's always a few renegades out there, isn't there? But I would say that these certainly, I don't think it's fair to say all of them, but I'd say certainly a lot of the reptilians and the grey, the worker ones, I'd say that they're on a lower vibration than the other ones. Would you say that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I think it's been really important for the collective to raise the vibration in order to, keep these more negative beings at bay. So, how do I explain this? It's quite long, but basically it's as if like, what would you call them? I don't know what you would call it, like the government and, the way that we've been conditioned in society over the past number of years, we've been fed rubbish food, been told like, we drink, we smoke, do you know what I mean? There's all this stuff to keep us in this negative vibration, which makes it easier for these like reptilians or these greys to come in. Whereas when we're starting to take more responsibility for our health and our well-being, like doing yoga, having a more plant-based diet, all this raises our vibration, which is why they don't want us, they don't say to us, oh, this is the best way to look after yourself, instead say, oh, well, have some pills, have a drink, why all the pubs and restaurants are open.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And it makes sense from what you said about, when, the Pleiadians and the other races up there, the good ones, certainly. It makes sense that, they're not, people say, well, are they going to come and save us? Well, they're not going to come and save us, but they're going to help us to help ourselves. And if we raise our vibrations and we open up, then we are going to, win or ascend or whatever you want to call it, I suppose. Whereas if we go down the other road, where, like, say, if we're cut off from the source, which is eating rubbish and, injecting things in your body, for example, these kinds of things, you are going to be on a negative vibration. And my feeling is, I don't know what you think about this, but people who, whether, I don't know if abductions do exist, but if they do exist, I believe that you would have to be on that vibration to call that in, I think.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And I don't know, because I don't know anyone personally who's been abducted and where they were at the time. But what I do know is that if people have, like, and again, I spoke about in one of my videos about psychic attack and negative vibrations. Jimmy Savile came into me and I'm like, what are you doing, Jimmy?
You don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I just told him where to go. Do you know what I mean? But I think if you're potentially in a space where you're just not in a good space, then these sort of like negative entities that are floating around can see that and feel it. And they're like, it's a bit like your easy prey. Do you know what I mean? So that's sort of like, I suppose, where the greys may come in and be like, right, got you. Do you know what I mean? But
in a way, it's kind of, you're giving them permission in a way, even if it's on an energetic level. Because I know for a fact that people can channel in negative energy just as you can channel in positive. So, like, obviously, like yourself, you can channel in the Pleiadians, which is obviously a high vibration. You can just as easily channel in dark energies or negative energies if you want, but obviously you have to deal with the consequences of that, I suppose. So you can connect to these levels, and if you are negative, or if you're going through a negative thing in your life, like you mentioned, you will be doing it without realizing, because you will be lowering your vibration to that level. So, and this is what I think, when we talk to people like yourselves about people the Pleiadians and people. I think this is the message, really. If you raise your vibration, you'll be okay, really, because it's if you go down that hole, then you might not get out, really.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest messages that they've been bringing through is definitely around like unconditional love. So just like showing love to like each other. I was going to read out, wasn't I, this piece that I wrote last year.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Because honestly, like I just found it tonight and I thought I'll read it because it's from literally exactly the same time last year. And it's from the Pleiadians. And this is what they said back then, right? They said, and so it begins, the falling of the old, as we elected in a party who are so far from the truth of the majority, that are so far from being the light, that are so far from representing the collective, the people. It highlights even more the darkness. They have a spotlight now upon them. There is no escape. We can see them for who they are. We can see them for the true lies, the lying honesty, their hidden motives that are actually as clear as day. For those who feel they have been lied to will begin to come together, to form smaller groups, to support each other, to support humans, to say and show this is not the way. We can't rely on one group of people to help our elderly neighbour on the corner or the mum who needs some support and childcare. This is up to us, to move forward in a state of union. Sometimes change comes from the bottom, and that is where we are. We can impact and change our communities. We can impact and change those who are closest to us. Through compassion and kindness, we can work together. We create the world we want to live in. We take action and use our voices to collaborate and cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it says then, the world as we know it has to change to support the future of our existence. Change and upheaval can feel tough. We are all part of the change. How we shop, how we choose to educate our children, how we choose to spend our time, how we choose to work. What can you do today to make a change?
That's really good. That's a nice bit of information. That is really positive. And I think the key there is, and I think you know this, and a lot of people who are switched on really know this, and I think the government know this as well, which is interesting. That it's us that creating the future in a collective or even in an individual. What you perceive is what you receive, and this is the biggest thing that people need to understand. That this is why there's a lot of manipulation around the media, because they're trying to get people to think in a certain way and create the future, because we create the future as individuals. And it's as simple as that, really. If you focus on the negative things, you are creating that, and as a collective, that's what you're going to get. So if you what you don't know what the saying is, it's what you expect tends to be realized or something. And that's the spiritual key, I suppose, isn't it, really?
Yeah I just keep saying, like, as within, so without, so the more work that you do on yourself to be at peace, to be like giving and receiving unconditional love, that's the reality that you create. And when you're looking beyond what's going on and you're not buying into everything, it's like, actually, it's very much what I said, like I had a conversation. There was a guy said to me the other day, he was saying, we need to get millionaires to help us. We need this, we need all these celebrities. I was like, no. I was like, it's up to every one of us as individuals to do what we want to do to create our communities. Do you know what I mean? And to create what we want our earth to look like. I said, it's not, people have talked about, Trump saving them, or the common law system saving them, or whatever. Like, some people are still looking externally for systems or someone to save them. But actually, it's for us to do the work ourselves, on ourselves, so that we can then share that, be the light, and share it with others, and cause that sort of ripple effect, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think these things are useful. That the Trumps and the common law and these. I think it's a useful tool to wake people up. But ultimately, it's people's choice, free will, and everything to make that choice. And and it's basically down to that, I think. So I think the message really is good. One thing I want you to ask as well, and I've just kind of received this information about. This is apparently not particularly specifically from me, but the Pleiadians have mentioned about a DNA upgrade on the 21st of December, which is only Is that only, I don't even know what day we are, maybe
Yeah.
a couple of weeks away or something. Are you aware of this? Is there something you're aware of?
Yeah, so so I basically became aware of this story about 2 months ago. So I'd met a lady for a coffee and we were chatting, and she shared this story with me about the 21st of December. And then I didn't really think anything of it. And then the next day, something popped up in my Facebook feed, or someone messaged me going, "Oh my God, Lindsay, you need to read the story." And it was exactly the same story. So you know when you're like, right, I'm taking notice. And the story was about a box which had been buried under Uluru by the Pleiadians. And and what they said is that, if the vibration of the planet is high enough, then this magic box will become activated and then activate all these sacred sites across the world. I'm interviewing a chap called Stephen Strong next Monday on my YouTube channel about his perspective. So he spent time with the Aboriginal elders and he's heard the story sort of firsthand. So I'm going to be speaking to him about it. But my feeling is, which is I shared with a friend today, I said, how do I explain this? Okay. So you know how we were just saying about how people are looking to Trump to save them, etc. It feels a little bit like, that there's an expectation in the air that come the 22nd of December or the 21st of December, we're all going to change and everything's going to be different just like that. Yeah. And so we're going to wake up on the 22nd of December and all those people around us who, had no idea what was going on are all going to be like, "Oh my God, I get it now." I say, yeah, but that's not the feeling that I get. I feel as if the 21st of December is an important date, and there may be sort of something that happens internally, if you like, within the earth system, within the energy system, potentially within ourselves. But we have been ascending quite at a much faster rate this year than we have done in previous years. So many of us, especially I don't know if you found, but since probably July onwards, my diet's completely changed. I can't, my body won't eat cheese anymore. It just doesn't want cheese. So I've gone more or less vegan. My skin on the outside, like it was as if it had sunburn in like October, it was peeling. I was just like, what is going on? And I was out, nothing else had changed. So we have been ascending very quickly. And I feel as if the energies are going to be quite intense between now and the 21st. But it's not like something magical is going to happen overnight. It's like I said before, this as within, so without. It may happen within the energy systems of the earth and then start to ripple out more to other people who maybe aren't so aware of what's going on right now.
I think you're right. I think, it depends on which level you're on, I suppose. I mean, people who are, tuned into the higher frequencies will pick this thing up a lot quicker. And obviously, if you lower down the scale, obviously it'll take you a bit longer. But these things generally don't happen overnight. These type of things. It's generally a bit of a process, isn't it? So, but it's very positive, really. That these things are happening and people are becoming more switched on, because once people become switched on properly or awake, whichever you want to say, things will change very, very quickly. Then, if the veil's lifted and everyone can see exactly what's going on, which I can, you can, certain people can, but there's lots of people who are still completely oblivious to everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I think it's about, how I was saying about standing in your light as well, and it's being able to have those honest conversations with those around you and saying, look, this is who I am and these are my values, these are my beliefs, this is what I feel, and just being able to share them openly and honestly with those around us, rather than knowing all the stuff ourselves but then go, well, I'm not going to tell him because do you know what I mean? It's just planting seeds, continue to plant seeds, and sharing our knowledge and experience with each other as well. That's what
well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we started doing these videos, really, just to kind of, give people a little bit of something to sort of think about and, maybe, consider themselves as well. And, and I think that's kind of one of the most important things, really. It's not a case of, have to go out on the street. I mean, if you do go on the street and protest, or best, fair play to you. But we don't have to do that. It's just a case of if you can wake up people around you in your group or your energy field, then we're all doing a little bit, aren't we? Really? And once you get to that tipping point, which will happen at some stage, then things will change quite quickly. Then I think.
Yeah, and it's funny because I keep sharing with people because people are like, what happens if I see one of these aliens, these higher beings or these Pleiadians, what's going to happen? And I was like, it's not like ET is just suddenly going to appear in front of you. Yeah. I'm like, they're very subtle, they come in with love, they come in with the light and their energies. So it's not going to, I don't feel as if it's going to be like a massive shock. Like people are starting to see things out there, in the skies, people are more aware of them. And just having, like I said, conversations like this can really help. But I was going to mention as well, one of the things that I started doing was this light language as well. So have you heard of that?
Not really, no. I'd be interested to hear about that.
So again, I'll show you. So I started it by painting. Okay, so I was just painting with my daughter, and I sort of like started doing like these symbols, and I was like, it feels a bit like a cross between sort of like, I don't know, like Chinese and Arabic and something. And then I did a healing one-to-one session with a lady, and I said, can I just ask you? I just feel like I need to say these words. So I was drumming. I just started saying these words to her, and it was just 2 words. And I said, you need to keep saying them. And then I did an Instagram live the other day, and thankfully I was by myself, and I was singing Flashdance What a Feeling, but it wasn't those words. It was like this light language. And a friend of mine at the weekend, she went, Lindsay, I recognized the words you were saying, even though to my mind it didn't make any sense. She went, at a soul level, I could feel it. And I feel like that's what this light language does. It's like we're being given, because when people were talking about light codes and light activations and that, I was like, I don't really understand what people are talking about. I was like, I'm not getting any light codes coming in because I don't know what they are. And then I feel as if what it is, it's more just, like, how do I explain this? It was just allowing, I suppose, like my voice to be used. And I did a session with a friend of mine who I knew had spoken a bit of light language. And I was like, what do I do with this? And she said, just start making these, like, just start speaking in the shower. Just start speaking when you're going for a walk. Just start practicing and just seeing what comes out. So I started, and then I was like, oh, this is quite cool, this is. So I can sort of give you an example if you want.
Yeah, sure. Go for it, yeah.
Okay, let me just try and think. Okay. We just tune in. So what it sort of does is it bypasses the logical brain because it doesn't really make any sense. Okay, let's just see. Okay, I feel like I need to sing it. So it just goes like, Ashawanda Ishanasa Falawana Ishanana Akalama Safawanda Ishawanda Salamanda Ilawanda Sanatana Isha Sana Inawanda Afawanda.
That's really I could imagine that being part of some sort of meditation, really. With that those I could imagine that being, with either with a bit of music or not, that it could kind of be a bit of a mantra or a meditation, maybe.
Yeah, it works quite well with the drum. My body's gone all tingly just from sort of like saying those few bits. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I just allow whatever it is that wants to come through to sort of utilize my voice. And it's weird because it started sometimes when I was meditating, it was as if like my throat was speaking words, but my mouth was opening. So it said like a couple of letters, and then I was doing one meditation, and it was a man's voice spoke through my throat, and I was just like, "What's that?"
That's a bit strange, yeah. No. So, the light language thing is interesting because it sounds a little bit like, when you get your Reiki symbols, it sounds a bit like that. And I wonder if it's a similar process then. That's because obviously I don't know, I'm not an expert on Reiki either, really. I don't know a bit about it, but when you get the symbols, you're connecting to different energies, I suppose, as well. So maybe is this some sort of connection there, maybe?
Yeah, I have no idea. So, because someone said, "What does it do?" and I was like, "Let me just ask." And that was the sort of the message I got. It was like it bypasses, because if it was English words, then your brain would go, "Well, that means that, and that means that, and that means that." Or if it was like, even if it was a Spanish or French or German, you know, somewhere in your brain it would be trying to make sense of the words, because these words don't really make
No,
sense.
and I've just got it's a subliminal, some sort of subliminal activation in your mind.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, because obviously, you know, subconscious has got everything going on in there. So all these, I think these things are activating something, you know, in your subconscious, which is in your you know, energy really, because obviously subconscious is connected to all your lives and your, you know, all this kind of thing. So I feel like it's something like that, you know, that's happening, you know,
Yeah.
where people won't be aware. It's like the subliminal things you get on the TV. You don't know it's happening to you, but it's made a, you know, it's made an impact. So I feel like that's what it's doing.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like, you know, again, it's, you know, sometimes when people say, "Oh, you know, so if I come and have this, like, if I come and have a Reiki session, am I going to be better, or am I going to be fixed?" It's like, yeah, it's a start. You know, it's part of the process, and that's what I feel the light language is as well. It's like it's part of
Mm,
the process of healing, and like you said, activation, and
mm.
sort of reminding the soul at some level, like, who we
Yeah,
are.
I sort of I sort of think of the brain and the body in a kind of in a context of a kind of a computer program really. And if you
Mm,
put in things like these codes that you've got, they're activating a program or something on an
mm,
energetic level anyway. I feel like that's kind of how it's working really. You know,
yeah.
because you can use the analogy of your body being a computer quite easily really
Mm,
in a lot of ways. So I think there's something in that as well. So all these things that you, and I also I think I don't know if you think about it. So I've got any comments on this, but I think that's very similar to what the crop circles are. I think they are symbols as well, and I think they activate something on some level for people, and I don't think people are aware of it.
I've just
So
got all goosebumpy again. I've made that word up, goosebumpy. Yeah. So yeah, I tend to agree, and I think
mm,
yeah. I'm quite fascinated by crop circles, but yeah,
Mm, I mean, there's so much stuff out there. We could go on forever, probably, you
I
know.
know.
But it's like a jigsaw puzzle. This is why it's so interesting because it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You go something and you think, oh yeah, great, that's connected in some way, or you know, or that's connected. So, um, okay, let's talk a bit more about the Pleiadians. Do you? I don't know if you do know, but do you know about? You know, you mentioned briefly about the background where they came from. Do you know much about the background? You know, of their race.
No, they haven't really shared that much with me about that, to be honest, and I haven't really asked them. So no, all I know is that they are very much, like I said, they're assisting us in terms of our emotions and our heart, and helping us to get to that space of unconditional love. Whereas the energies of the Arcturians, for example, are more about like building societies and helping us to do the next thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's like the Pleiadians are helping us to work through our healing stuff and our
Mm-hmm.
emotions. And then the Arcturians are like, right, now you've done that bit, right? How are you going to create this society? You know, and they're sort of like
Right.
helping us and giving, I suppose, giving people different ideas more or less on the how and the
Mm-hmm.
technical sides of what our world's going to look like. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had, like I said, that much contact with the Syrians or the other ones. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, when Ashtar came through, um, Ashtar was I keep calling him he, I can't help it. But Ashtar was saying that basically there was a lot of psychics and mediums that were channeling Ashtar in the 1960s, because that was when we were first meant to ascend
All right. Okay. Right.
into
It's interesting.
5D. You know, they had all the peace and love. John Lennon was an ascended master. That's what they told me.
Mm.
And but there was still too much negativity and corruption at that time. but they said this is the time now, and you will ascend. So.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's been a number of times during our history where we've had this opportunity, because the Mayans talk about different, I can't remember what it is, but I think we're in their fifth cycle, I think, the Mayans. So I think they've talked about different times when we've had opportunities to ascend or things like that.
Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah. The only time they've told me about is the 1960s, which I believe, because the rest of, because time to us seems like ages, whereas time to them up there is like over in the blink of an eye. So 1,000 years, like, so I feel as if we've had to go through all the processes that we have, all the revolutions and the wars and everything. I'm sure I was told that there was a third world war planned, like in the physical, which was going to be sort of like I think that was supposed to be in the 50s or the 60s, but thankfully that obviously didn't happen. But yeah, the only time they made me aware was the 1960s. That was when it was meant to happen. But
right, that's great. So let me ask you about any sort of really interesting information you've got from the Pleiadians. Anything that's come down that you think's really, what's the most interesting stuff that they've told you, really, I suppose?
I suppose last year for me, so like that piece that I read was after, I think that was after Boris had been elected in. But a lot of the information that I was given last year was about this year. So, they were talking about the fall of the patriarchal system, the collapse of the financial system. And at the time I was like, well, how's this going to happen? I'm not really sure. And so for me, I think that was really interesting, knowing now what they told me then. So I put sort of like all of last year's channelings are in my second book, Awaken Your Soul, which talk about what's happening this year. They didn't tell me there was going to be a pandemic, they didn't tell me the how bit. They were just giving me this information as insight. And yeah, I suppose the other bit was Lemuria, because like I said, I'd never heard of it before. And like I said, they told me that I'd been this priestess, and my name had been Ralisha, and there was 12 of us. And I suppose like it's not so much the channelings, I suppose, that I get from the Pleiadians, but it's these aha moments, the other day I was like, Jesus had 12 disciples. I was like, oh my God, 12 disciples. And then there's 12 in the Galactic Council. And then there was 12 priestesses. The number 12 is really important. And just these, just little bits, I suppose, that the Pleiadians bring through, just to sort of like allow us to know that they're there and they're working with us. So yeah, I think they're probably the biggest two, telling me about what was going to happen this year, and then tell me what had happened in the past, and Lemuria as well. I suppose they're the biggest things.
Great stuff. Well, we just want to have a quick break now, just to sort of tell people, if any people are online, you can ask a question, to ask Lindsay a question. So just post it in the comments. Obviously, this will be recorded, so you can listen back to this as well. But if anyone's got any comments or any questions, just stick them in the comments. Towards the end, we'll just ask a few questions if there's any good questions, and we'll see where we go from there. So, is there anything else you want to sort of talk about now, Lindsay? Flaws in relation to channeling. I mean, one thing I'll just before I kind of forget, really, if somebody wanted to sort of, if they thought they've got some ability and they wanted to start doing some channeling, what's the kind of best sort of gateway for that for people, really?
So my advice would be to just start. Don't think, because self-doubt will just like put you off doing anything forever. So either start through writing, and just, so one thing I started doing was just literally putting my pen at the top of a piece of paper and just doing like squiggles, like loops. And then when a word came into my mind, I would just start, and I didn't question whether it was my word or if someone else had put that word there. I would just start. And that was very much sort of like, that's very much how I do it. So now the words come into my mind, and it's like, I'll ask a question in my mind now of whoever I'm channeling, and they are what I'm finding is they're giving me the answer before I've even finished my question. I'm like, so it's sort of like doing it like that. So yeah, either doing it through writing or speaking as well. So, you know, like I've been pushed to do my readings now. You know, I do my readings every week, and initially I was doing my cards, and I'm like, this angel card and this and this. And then I was just basically told, you need to do it without the cards, and so you just go free flow. We will give you the words, you know, speak. So sometimes now I'm channeling, but I don't realize it, just through the words that I'm saying to people. So I suppose, yeah, just trust in yourself as well, you know, that you have the abilities, you are capable of doing this. Because I said, I never set out with the intention of being able to speak to these multidimensional beings, but it's happening, and, you know, I trust it. So,
yeah, great. Have you been in touch with any other races or beings during that time, or is it just the Pleiadians really you've been talking to? Really?
Yeah, so it's just been the Pleiadians. I've had various spirits come through this year. So like I mentioned Shakespeare at the beginning, but this year I had Joan of Arc, who took the piss out of me because she said, she went, oh, you didn't know I was from France, Lindsay, but that's all right. Geography doesn't need to be a strong point. You're good at other stuff. I was like, thanks, Beck. So she came through, Princess Diana, you know, Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln. And so yeah, John Lennon, and you know, I was so excited with John Lennon. I was like, I'm not even going to sit down and write what you want to say. I'm just going to share what you want to say, you know, like on my channel. But I think for me it was interesting to find out what their words were about their experiences. And for me, I suppose that gave me validation that, you know, the stories that we read or the stories that we see aren't always based on truth.
No, I think that's probably very correct, actually. Yeah. If you was wanting to, could you sort of call somebody if you wanted to, you know, get in touch with somebody in the past, or is it a case of you just kind of get whoever's, you know, on the phone right at the moment? Can you?
So yeah, so I can. I did this for a friend the other day as an experiment, and I just said, oh, just give me a name, someone that I don't know. So he gave me the name Johnny Moore. So I was sat there and I was like, Johnny Moore. And he said, oh, ask him what his favourite song is. And I was like, anyway, I sat there. I says, he's not telling me his favourite song. I said, but all I'm getting is, I says, I'm getting the word like 1950s. And I says, I don't know why. I says, I'm getting the word Negro as well. And I says, I'm seeing like a minstrel band. And then I says, it's a bit like, I says, you know that drum that the Drifters have got, right? And his jaw dropped and he went, Johnny Moore was the lead singer of the Drifters. I was like, was he? Wow. I said I'd heard the Drifters, you know, as a kid, but that was before we had like all these music channels, and I didn't even know they were black. And he showed me a picture afterwards. He went, that's the Drifters, Lindsay. And I was like, oh my God. I said, that was them. That was who I saw. I said, it was him. He said, yeah, that's him. And he'd worked with them. So yeah, and then another friend of mine, again, you know, when I was sort of like just getting into this, I was like, go on, give me a name. Who do you want me to speak to? He said, can you speak to William Blake, the poet? I said, oh yeah, go on then. I said, what do you want me to ask him? And I was just writing down the answers. And when I read it back to him, he was just like, chuffing Allens, do you know what I mean? He said, that sounds like William Blake. And so yeah, so all I need is a name. Right. And then I just set the intention and go, right, what is it that you want to share? So
would it be the same if you wanted, let's say for example, you wanted to find out about something or you wanted an answer to something? Could you ask a question and would somebody come in to answer that question? You know, if you know, I don't know, like let's say for example, you wanted to know, you know, what's happening at some time on the planet or whatever. Is that something you could do as well?
Yeah, because because if it wasn't a spirit coming through, then the Pleiadians would be able to tell me. So I have had Madeline McCann through. Right. Wow. She told me that I wasn't allowed to share the information until she came back, basically. So I've had information, and when stuff like that comes through, then I do feel like it is a responsibility to, you know, like either like call the police or, you know, do or say something, because then I feel like, well, you know, that information's like I've had it, and I'm like, I can't just sit with it. I have to do something with it, which is why I normally share the words, because often the words that do come through aren't just for me, they're for the collective. But yeah, if someone gave me a name of someone, then I can connect with their energy. And if, for example, someone was unsure maybe of how a loved one had passed or had some questions, then I could tune in and do that as well.
Great. We've got an interesting question anyway on the board from Rob. He's asked, do you know what the Pleiadians call the Anunnaki? Are they what we call the reptilians? This is something we kind of touched on earlier, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just asking. Okay, so they recognize, this is what they're giving me now. They recognize that there are other beings in the galaxy, but they don't have labels for them like we do. So we like to be able to call, you know, a human, and a Pleiadian, but they don't have names or labels for this. They recognize beings through their energy and whether they're resonating or not.
Okay. So in relation to that, then how would they recognize whether you call them the Anunnaki, reptilian, or even if they're connected? How would they recognize them in that respect then? Are they part of their collective, for example?
Bear with me. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so they're, how do I explain this? Yeah, they just keep saying they recognize them through their energy. So if they're on the same energy vibration, if they're vibrating at the same level, then they recognize that they're of the same, I want to say, like, consciousness, collective consciousness. If they're not, if they're like, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. They're just giving me it's based on feelings,
right?
Rather than saying, right, well, you're this and you're that. Okay, because what they're saying as well is like they recognize that there is the ability for them to change as well and to shift and to move. So one day, for example, there may be a reptilian in front of them, yeah, and their vibration doesn't match, their energies don't match. But then they're saying they can shift. So then the next day it might be like, oh, well, they're not that anymore. And they're saying it's a very sort of like human construct that we have these labels and we have these needs to label everything. So then the brain's working rather than like our hearts and how we're feeling about that person.
That makes sense, because I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, they're generally considered to be a negative or a low vibration, but I don't think that's necessarily got to be the case, because, you know, I mean, it's like on this planet as well, really. You know, you've got various different kinds of people. I would imagine the very high races or energies would all be on quite a high vibration, or that's just kind of something that's come to me now about in relation to the Pleiadians and maybe other races. Are they from a different dimension, or are they from this dimension? You know.
Okay. So the Pleiadians have always said that they're fifth dimensional. So they operate in that dimensional frequency. And as far as I'm aware as well, when Ashtar came through, there was talk of I think it was the ninth dimension. So there are out there in the galaxy different dimensions that the beings operate in. But again, it's I just get this feeling of fluidity. And so even though the Pleiadians are there at the minute in the fifth dimension, I feel like because of the work we're doing in this collective and we're raising our frequency, that has a knock on to everything in the galaxy as well. So it's not just that what the work we're doing and the stuff we're doing here affects us, it's having this effect out there as well.
I think that's right, because I think everything impacts everything else, doesn't it, really? So as we raise our vibration on a planetary level or whatever, it's going to impact, you know, and if we raise it to such a degree, then we will possibly move up into a different dimension anyway, maybe.
Yeah.
So would you say then that, you know, if the Pleiadians are fifth dimension, they would be able to move through the fourth dimension and stuff? Do you think that's something that they can do?
Yeah, I feel so. I feel like they all have the abilities to move through these dimensions, which is why I feel like there's this fluidity, and because the time and is just everything. It's like, I don't. They make me laugh. They're like, you can't comprehend it at the moment. I'm like, okay. They have a good sense of humor, but yeah, I feel like they can come into the third dimension, but because they've done their work on themselves to be in that dimension, it's like they can come down without being affected. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you're gonna have drunk Pleiadians going home, or, you know, that they're not affected by our energy because they're vibrating at a much higher level than us.
Yeah, I mean, it would sort of make sense to me that they could come down the dimensions. Probably not travel up to the higher dimensions, because obviously, you know, they'll have to, you know, make their way up there. But it would make sense if you've got an energy here that's conducive to their energy, then I would imagine that they can come through, just as the dark beings, I suppose, can come through if the energy is conducive to them, I suppose.
Yeah.
Rob's mentioned as well in relation to the question. He says he's had a connection to these people. He doesn't get names, just energetic signatures, which is what you mentioned as well. So, because I think as well, a lot of these aliens, you know, we are. I don't know. This might be an interesting question to ask. But so, do you think that these aliens have ever physically been down to the planet, or do you think it's just on an energetic, psychic level? You know, for example, you know, there's lots of talk of aliens coming down and visiting people or individuals, or even governments sometimes. Do you think this has happened in the past, or do you think this is something that they kind of don't do?
It's interesting because a friend of mine sent me a video the other day, which apparently was leaked footage of a multidimensional being from the 60s being interviewed by the FBI. And I was watching it, but my feeling is, and this is based more on my experience, I would say, you know, because I woke up the other morning and I knew there was a multidimensional being in my bedroom, but this one was quite short, but it felt like an elder sort of thing, and he just sort of like floated around my bed and then disappeared, and I was like, oh, that's a bit strange. But I feel like it is more on the energetic level, rather than physical. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the ones that people have seen tend to be the greys, which are probably not a very high alien, or sometimes the reptilian type. You know, then there's not many cases of people seeing. There are some, you know, the Nordic beings and these types of things. They aren't very common actually. Whereas, you know, the greys seem to be popping up all over the place.
And I mean, it might like it, I just like, it could be that we maybe do see them, but because we don't maybe recognize what a Pleiadian looks like potentially. Do you know what I mean? So it may be that they're here through us in physical form, you know. So like, I know that I am of Pleiadian origin, but I'm not blue. Do you know what I mean?
No, that's right. Well,
So,
this is interesting. Sorry, this is interesting because I won't tell you who this person is, but there's a lot of talk around that there's somebody who's in the public eye who is actually a Pleiadian. And if you look at that person, you can sort of see why they're saying this. I don't know if I should mention who the person is. I don't know. Have you heard anything like that, where there's certain people who've got? There's one person. I won't tell you who it is straight away. So people at home can guess who it is. But they've got a very striking look, very unusual look. I suppose a kind of a Pleiadian look. And a lot of people are saying, I don't know where, if this is, I don't know if this is any channel information or what, but a lot of people are saying that this they believe that this person and their family are actually Pleiadians.
Mm.
Do you think
Yeah.
that's something
Yeah,
that could
I do think it's possible. And I think, there are some people who do look similar or have sort of like, I suppose the reason that they look similar is, if their origins, if their ancestors, were some of the first here through the Pleiadians, those genes carried down. So some people do have those physical tendencies to look similar to those beings. So yeah, I met a lady just randomly in your high street the other day, and we were just chatting, and I mentioned to her, I was like, oh, sometimes I speak the Pleiadians, and she went, oh, I'm Arcturian, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, so people are wanting to know more about who they are at a soul level and where they're from. And I think the Pleiadians are definitely one of the most common, and the Arcturians and the Syrians and the Lyrans, which I've mentioned. But there are others, who there's not many of them, because what I was sort of told or given was that, that when we choose to come to Earth, it's like we put ourselves forward and we're like, right, I'm ready for the challenge, I'm ready for this experience. And if you imagine the galaxy, if you like, is like the counties of England, and maybe like one person goes from each county, and then you've got one person from Norway and one person from Denmark, so one person from every single country. So sometimes it's like you might feel really alone, because you're like, I don't know anyone from my particular soul origin. But then there might be like 100 Pleiadians who are like, yeah, we're all going, and that's then when you sort of like can maybe recognize and sort of like see each other at a soul level. But I think there's definitely more people who are becoming more interested in the idea and wanting to know more, and definitely want to explore. They're like, right, this is me, Lindsay, for example. My mum was this and my dad was this, but people want to know more about who they are like at their soul, and where their soul's from as well, which is interesting.
That's interesting. I'll just share something with you, because many years ago I met a medium, and they had the ability to see if if a person was. Now I don't know if they were actually an alien, or if they could see their source or their history. I don't know, but they could see certain people, and they were different, and they could tell that they were different types of aliens. So I don't know if it was. I don't know what that is. Whether it's actually that person is an alien, and they don't know whether it's they've got a very strong life an alien, or whether they're channeling in an alien. I don't know what that was, but I thought that was very interesting, and they could tell when they met somebody, or just random. And I don't think it was that common, but there were certain people that this person had met where there were reptilian aliens. One of the people who this person met had a huge crystal that they carried around with them, and when they looked at this person, then you could see that they were reptilian. There was another person in there when they saw them, and it were a frog alien.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently this wasn't very common, but this person had the ability to see certain aliens in people. So that, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of anyone having that ability.
I've only known one person who's been able to do that, actually, and could see, and certainly could see in certain people's eyes, because reptiles have different eyes in people, than some people. So that's interesting. In relation to if you was doing a reading for somebody, and they asked what their background was in relation to, or what connections they've got to which alien races, is that something that you would be able to find out, or ask the question?
So I would ask the question and basically just write down what I'm given for that person, and sort of like where they originate from. I was told, I think it was last year, when I was told that I could access people's Akashic records, but I needed their permission to do so. So again, I did a couple of guinea pig styles on a couple of people, and I made them both cry, because they were just like, how do you know that? Do you know what I mean? How do you know who I am, like, underneath all this sort of like facade and all this stuff? And I was just like, that's what I was told about you. So, and I don't have a filter. So I just like, I have to say what I'm given.
Mm.
And even if sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I really don't want to say that, that's what I'm being told to say. So I share it with people.
So people who are watching this video and other people around who are quite, spiritually aware, would you say that they've got connections to these sort of races, would you say then?
Yeah, I feel so. I feel as if, I feel as if they have connection, and also that this is, especially this year, this is part of like the reason we came here, to be awake at this time, to be aware, and to have done sort of like the healing work on ourselves, because a lot of people, I suppose, going into this final quarter of this year have maybe been doing this for maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's all been leading up to the end of this year and going into next year and beyond. And it's about us sort of like standing up and going, right, well, this is me, because I remember the first time when I was like, oh my God, I'm going to talk about like, what are people going to think that I'm channeling these Pleiadians and these beings? There's this part of you that just goes, what are people going to think? They're going to think I'm crazy, but then
people think you're a nutcase, won't they? Not your fault.
Yeah, my daughter just kindly pointed out, she just went, Mummy, people think you're crazy anyway. So I was like, right, I've just got to do it. And, when you do it once, then it's like people sort of who have had that experience before, or who have had similar things happen to them, it's like you're opening a door for them to go, yeah, me too. So it's I'm interviewing a lady next week who I just met this week, and on our website, she's only a young girl, she's like 19, 20. But on our website, she talks about aliens, and I said, as soon as I saw that, I said, I knew I needed to speak to you. I was like, what's your experience? What's happened to you? I was like, let's arrange an interview, let's arrange a chat, because the more that we're talking about that there is life on other planets, there are other beings, they're not all scary, most of them want the best for us.
Yeah.
Then the easier that sort of transition is going to be for other people as well.
In relation to like planets and the moon, do you think there are aliens on the moon or on other planets?
Okay, hold on. I don't feel there are on planets in our solar system. I feel as if it's too close. I feel as if the landing on the moon was staged in the 60s and 70s. It was like, oh, who's going to get there first? Oh, let's quickly just like put something together and see where we've been. Because I still don't get it. Why, if you went once, why would you not go again? Do you know what I mean?
Apparently, I saw something the other week, and apparently the NASA people now, there's structures on the moon now. They've said there's definitely structures. I don't know if they're being used right now, but they've definitely highlighted the structures now. So that's interesting, and that could be why we've not been back, or maybe they're suggesting that we went before the actual landing, and we're still there now. So it's that's very interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Like, but I feel as if our solar system, it's more beyond our solar system. That's where the life is. The words that I'm getting in my mind. Can you remember that song from the 80s where it started going, "It's life, Jim, but not as we know it."
Not as we know it. Yeah, that's right. Well, it is really, because I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert on the dimension, but I would imagine if you go up the dimensions, I don't think you'll have a lot of physical beings anyway. Really, will you?
Oh.
So would you say the fifth dimension? Would you say that they're not physical beings? Would you say that? Would you say they're more energy? What do you think?
I feel as if they're more energy beings, because when I was asking them about, how relationships work in the fifth dimension, and they were like, well, we're not physical because they're androgynous. They're like, there's no need to be physical. It's based on our energy and our vibration and how we feel with each other. And I was just like, it's difficult to comprehend.
Yeah.
When you know what life's like here, and it can be a bit sort of like, well, it's a bit different.
Yeah. It is a tricky one, because if you believe the idea, which I do, that everything's energy anyway, and we're just a projection, really. So maybe when people talk about shape shifting, and aliens, then it's not difficult to understand if you understand that they're just energy and everything's a projection anyway.
Yeah,
I suppose. So I think we're nearly finishing off, but before we finish, what might be good is to just maybe could you give us a little bit of insight for next year, so keep people a bit upbeat and positive? Is there anything you've got for next year, which is, we don't want the world to end or anything, or to be dragged into sort of vaccination camps, but if you've got anything positive, it'd be nice to end on a positive note, I think.
Yeah, so in terms of like the vaccinations, we have choices, so even though obviously the MSM and the government are like, oh, this is going to be mandatory, they can choose to try and make our lives difficult by having it, but ultimately we are in control of our bodies. That free will still is there. I do feel as if Biden's not meant to stay there. I do feel like Trump will come in. I feel like he'll be back in January. That's my feeling. And I was told that he will be the last president of America. So who knows what will happen after that. But I feel as if next year, it's a bit like from the channeling. It's about connecting with people who are like-minded around you and finding people who have vision. So like I have had so many conversations this year especially with women who are like, right, I've got this idea, Lindsay, yeah, I'm going to set up this wellbeing center and there's going to be a community and there's going to be this. And I'm like, yeah, same vision. So there's lots of us who have this vision of getting off grid, do you know what I mean? But part of that is about doing this work, this sort of like between now and March. I feel like something's going to happen next spring. I'm not sure exactly what, but I feel like there may be changes in law or changes regarding land or something like that. So I feel like between now and sort of like March time, like get to know your neighbours, who wants to plant stuff, where can we grow our herbs, and doing the work now to become less reliant on the system will help us going forward into next year. Yeah, just get used to sharing stuff. Like me and my neighbour through lockdown, it's like, oh, I've got some spare bananas. Do you want them? Do you know what I mean? Or I've got some apples, and there's people around my village will put out apples from their tree and just say, right, free apples. So finding like-minded people to start creating these communities and to start relying less on the system going into next year. But we are what we're seeing play out is like watching EastEnders, if you imagine. If you watch EastEnders every day, like it's always bad news and there's always something. Whereas if you just
very negative, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, if you switch off EastEnders and go, right, you know what? I don't want to watch this anymore. I don't want to be in the audience anymore. Yeah. I'm going to go and create my own play. I'm going to go and write my own play, because this is depressing. And start thinking about yourself as like the major actor in a play. So how do you see your play actor now? Because that's, we are in charge, like we create our own lives and we create our communities. And so, yeah, think about how you want your life to look like and then start living it as if you're writing it, or write it down in it. Yeah, something like that. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I think it's really good advice. I think, the key is just kind of look after yourself, not look after yourself, look after your community and try and stay out of the system, really. Because, I think the government is the worst soap opera I've ever seen. The script's terrible. In the actings, I've never seen out like it. And it's just so negative. So stay away from all that nonsense in the media, and and just grow your own food and keep yourself out of the system as much as you can, I think. So
and if because there's one of the groups that I'm a part of, we were talking last night about what can you grow now in December, because obviously it's cold and everything else, and apparently garlic's really good to grow now. So the tip that I was given yesterday, which I think is brilliant, is go and buy one big clove of garlic from the supermarket, take it all apart, plant them, and apparently in 4 months you'll have even like more bulbs. So I was like, brilliant. And lettuce and spinach, I think, on windowsills, and herbs, and just start thinking now, right, what can I do? Do you know what I mean? And whatever space you've got, and even sort of like thinking beyond that. So if you've got like, if you're in a village or if you're in a city or wherever you are, look around you and start identifying opportunities to utilize that space. You know, so if you can like stick a few plant pots, you know,
Yeah.
in a bus stop or whatever, you know, start doing it now, and then people will see you doing it, and they'll start to feel inspired and go, oh well, they've popped up there, so why don't I do something over here? And that's how we sort of start to create the world that we want instead.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if we all contribute something, you know, we can survive outside of the system, you know, to some degree at least.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key in it, really. So, okay, so we're going to ready to sign off. But before we go, just tell people about yourself, Lindsay, if they want to get in touch with you or follow your work or whatever. If they're a big fan, you know, how do they contact you?
Okay, so at the minute you can find me either on my website, which is lindsaybanks.com. I'm on YouTube, Lindsay Banks, Instagram, Lindsay Banks 111. I'm on Twitter. I'm on all the social media platforms. And I've got 2 books. So my first book is A Gentle Hug for the Soul, which is very much the foundation for a spiritual existence, if you like. And then the second one is Awaken Your Soul, which goes more deeply into the spiritual journey and includes some of the channelings. So yeah, you can find me there. You can contact me on Facebook. And yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, great. Well, if you find me over some links, I can put some links on the page as well under the video, so people can find you there. But we'll be on YouTube shortly anyway, probably by tomorrow, all being well. So you can rewatch this and share it and spread the word, really.
Fabulous.
So thanks for coming, Lindsay. It's been an interesting chat.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, love. Okay, right. So that's it. That's it from us tonight. But we've got another amazing guest next week. Pamela Sophia is talking about trauma and consciousness. So that's going to be dead exciting. I've no idea what it's all about, but it sounds really interesting. So keep in touch, like the page, share the page, get notifications and all that jazz, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.